Ireland depth chart for 2021. Ireland is what? The fourth team we're looking at. I haven't looked at England, the All Blacks, and the Springboks. The Springboks we did first, so if you kind of want a bit more info about what it's about, I introduced it a little bit more, I think, in that video. But yeah, we're going to have a look at basically which players played in which positions and for how long. So how did Andy Farrell divide up his time to allocate to the players in the 2021 year? What was his most picked 15 across the year? And what changes maybe we expect to see in 2022? There is a construction dude next door with a circular saw, so if you hear a buzzing sound, that's what that will be. But yeah, we will start with the front row because that's a pretty important place to start. And we do have to keep in mind with Ireland that there was a Lions tour which kind of disrupted the year. It's one that I've never really kind of taken too much, or as much, put that much attention on, being Kiwi, right, about just how disruptive it is. And having looked at the New Zealand and South Africans compared to the English, and now the Irish follow more of a similar pattern to the English, it's kind of easy to see that it is a real, it's a big chunk of disrupted time for coaches to try and keep building, even if it is only a small part of 1 year. It just means you got to make more changes because you got players off with the Lions. But anyway, front row. We'll start with loose head, which is relatively kind of even split between three guys. Kean Healy gets the majority of those minutes. He's your guy there in green, followed by Dave Kilcoyne, who's in blue, and then Ed Byrne, who is in yellow. But I think the interesting one, especially towards the tail end of the season, is your guy there in purple, and that's Andrew Porter, who also appears on the tight head side, but seemingly going forward, that may be something in terms of changes for 2022, that we see more of Andrew Porter starting, or at least coming off the bench, to pack down at loose head, because he's looked the business there. Absolutely. I know Kean Healy is kind of one of the more senior guys, so in terms of Rugby World Cups and what's his role going to be, maybe it is going to be the bench guy if he is able to kind of keep a spot in the squad. But yeah, I think that purple one is going to be one to watch when we look forward to 2022 to see how much of that time Andrew Porter has taken on that side. For the tight head side, obviously green is Tyke Furlong, and that number, which is pretty much half the time, is going to be even greater if not for the Lions tour. That guy is just going to play the lion's share of your minutes. He's just that good. Porter was also going to go on the tour, remember, but then he was injured, so he ends up missing out on some time anyway, but he's there in blue. So if you kind of chuck that blue time onto the loose head side, if he'd played all that time, you know, he probably would have had more time than Kilcoyne there on the loose head. But yeah, Furlong's your guy, essentially. As simple as that. You don't need to watch much Irish rugby to kind of realise that. Other guys, you got Beelum there in yellow, O'Toole there in purple, and then John Ryan there with the kind of little token appearance there in red. So if Furlong's shifting, maybe it's Finlay Beelum. I know he gets criticised a wee bit at times, or it's maybe O'Toole, but either way, you've got your front runner set in stone for the next goodness knows how long. I think he signed an extension to stay in Irish rugby, so as long as he's fit, you guys are looking pretty golden there. Hooker is one that I think also we will maybe see some changes going into next year, because the minutes are kind of maybe a wee bit unbalanced, because a lot of them that were allocated in the Six Nations didn't kind of follow through to the later periods of the year. So you got Herring there in green, has played pretty much half the minutes as well. And then Kelleher is there in blue. I think Kelleher has probably at this point taken on that starting role if he's fit and rearing to go. And then Heffernan's there in yellow with Dan Sheehan there in purple. And Dan Sheehan is another one, not that experienced in terms of his international career, but has taken to it like an absolute duck to water. So are we going to see more from those two in 2022? That would be my guess. But that's a lot of time invested into Rob Herring as well. So either way, the minutes are kind of being spread between multiple guys. It's been one since Best retired that no one has absolutely staked a claim on it. But for mine, Keller has been the favourite for a wee while, and it seems to be kind of panning out that way. That's the front row. Second row is a bit more interesting in that you've got guys on both sides, and I see that in one of the other videos. I gathered all these stats pretty manually from looking at the game trackers and some of the footage, and it may be that some of these guys who play on both sides are not 100%, but it should be pretty close. Your main guys at lock, 4 is Tyke Byrne, 5 is James Ryan. Those are you guys in green. So those are your leading contenders. But you got Ian Henderson, who also went on the Lions tour. Byrne went as well. But you got those two guys at number 4 in green is Byrne, and Hendo is there in blue. You guys are pretty stacked for locks in Ireland. It doesn't really seem to matter, especially because then if you're looking at number 4, the yellow guy is Ryan Baird. So even if your first guy goes down, be it James Ryan, be it Tyke Byrne, or be it Ian Henderson, you've got Baird who can step up. You've got Alton Deland, who's there in purple on both 4 and 5. You've even got Finney Wycherley there at 4, who's gotten a wee taste in red up the top of 4. And Baird and Byrne are on both sides as well. So Hendo's on both sides. You're pretty stacked. Even if your first guy goes down, I think Ireland, in terms of locking depth, are sitting quite pretty. And it gets even better if you think about the fact that Byrne, he appears at 4 in green, he appears at 5 in yellow, and he also appears in the back row as well, because he is just so versatile, and you don't lose much from him wherever you play him. He just adds a heap of value. So James Ryan, obviously not going on the Lions tour, managed to clock up some more minutes than the likes of Henderson and Byrne for Ireland. But that's been good to get some exposure into guys like Baird, who's had a bit more time. Finney Wycherley, as I say, only got a wee taste, but he's been in the environment now, so those are going to be well invested minutes, I'm sure. The back row is also one that's got its own kind of little story, because if you're looking at number 8, your main guy there is CJ Stunder, and he's retired now. So all those minutes in terms of building towards a Rugby World Cup, those are gone. So that's not quite 40% of the time for number 8 was CJ Stunder. But what you did see was Jack Conan, who also went on the Lions tour. He's there in blue. He's looked bloody good whenever he's played. So I think, despite the fact that CJ's gone, and you could look at those minutes and go, well, those are kind of down the drain in terms of World Cup prep, I don't think it's an area you're looking very weak, because then you've got Caelan Doris is there at yellow at number 8, and then Gavin Coombs as well at there in purple. So all those guys can do a very, very good job. I mean, Conan, Lions tour, like I mentioned, and then your man Doris, bloody hell, was the Autumn Nations kind of player of the series, because he was just everywhere. And he's versatile enough to play 6 as well. 6 is one of the ones that's had kind of more guys get some time, because Doris is your leading guy there at 6. Peter O'Mahony is there in blue, and then Tyke Byrne's there in yellow. So those 3 guys have divided the time between the 3 of them. And then there's a few guys who've had, I don't want to say token time, but not a heck of a lot. Reece Ruddock's there in purple, CJ Stunder's there in red, Jack Conan is there in the kind of brown, and then Gavin Coombs is there in white, just with that tiny little bit up the top. So I thought at the time when CJ was announcing that he was going to retire that, maybe that should be it for him in terms of, he should be out of selection, but he was still getting picked. I don't think it's going to have a long-term negative effect on the Irish squad, because the depth still seems there to me. 7 is Josh van der Flair, who's really set himself up as the leading kind of guy at the open side. And it's one that's also been kind of chopping and changing a wee bit, but you can see he's got real impressive time there. Will Connors, who's had a bit of an injury-disrupted season, is there in blue. Timony's there in yellow. Peter O'Mahony's there in purple. And then CJ Stunder has briefly popped in there in red. So I feel good for Van der Flair, because he's got a huge kind of work rate, and he's benefited by playing alongside a guy like Tyke Byrne, who can also help at the breakdown. Josh van der Flair's definitely very high energy. I'm not sure, I haven't checked his turnover stats, but I don't feel like, gut feeling is he's not like the best pilferer in the world, but he gets through a ton of work. So it doesn't have to kind of be those traditional roles. If you've got Tyke Byrne there to get the turnovers, well, who cares? Who cares what numbers on their back, as long as the team is getting the job done. So yeah, in the forwards, as I mentioned, disrupted by the fact that you got the likes of Furlong, Byrne, Henderson and whatnot going on the Lions tour, and the fact that CJ Stunder has decided to hang up the boots. But overall, I still think you're looking pretty solid. Maybe the fact that Porter is heading to loose head reduces your secondary player, whoever plays tight head. Because I don't think any of the secondary guys, with all due respect to like Beelam, O'Toole and Ryan at the moment, are as good as Andrew Porter is. But better to get that shift made now and to give someone else some more time going into 2022. For the backs, I've been really impressed by Jamison Gibson Park. I'm gonna say that right now. You can see here he's had more than half of the minutes for the halfbacks, and he's playing the kind of game that seems to suit the game plan at the moment in terms of just being lightning quick. He's quick to the breakdown and gets his ball out very quickly. Like that's his job, and he's been excelling at it. Connor Murray, who's also on the Lions tour, is there in blue. Craig Casey's there in yellow. Blade is there in purple as well. I think even Keenan had to pick up the ball at the back of the ruck a couple of times in one of the games when, was it someone went off injured? I can't quite remember. But yeah, for the most part, it's been Gibson Park as the first choice, and it's been encouraging to see Casey get some minutes as well. Because before I looked at the depth chart, I was a little bit concerned that Andy Farrell was too conservative by picking some of the old boys seemingly too much, looking a bit too much to the past and not giving the young guys some time. But I think he has, to his credit, given the young guys some time without chucking them absolutely in the deep end and asking them to kind of play 60, 70 minutes when they're in still single-digit caps. So Casey has been given that taste, if not kind of huge time. The question mark is, if Jamison Gibson Park is the leading guy, is it going to be Casey or is it going to be Murray going forward who takes that reserve spot? But anyway, we will see. 10 is also a good mix because Sexton, who always, I think he gets sick of it as well. People asking him, is he too old? When is he going to retire? He's played half the game time for Ireland. Carberry's there in blue. Billy Burns is there in yellow. Harry Byrne is there in purple. And Ross Byrne is there in red. Now, if we look at the pattern throughout the year, it looks like Sexton's still the number one guy, obviously, as captain. And he's been in solid form, man. Like, no complaints from me, even if sometimes I will question him as well. But maybe I should just keep my mouth shut because he's still getting the results. Carberry still seems to be the second choice guy, and he's, towards the end of the year, especially for Ireland, looked sharp as well. But I think we do need to be keeping an eye on that purple one, which is Harry Byrne, because he seems to have overtaken his brother already and probably overtaken Billy Burns as well. I think Billy Burns, it seems like that experiment's maybe done, but he did get his chance. He wasn't terrible by any means. I seem to remember him making a couple of mistakes in the Six Nations, but yeah, I think going forward, there's probably better options out there for Ireland than Billy Burns. But again, if there's an injury crisis, the All Blacks had it in 2011 when they had Dan Carter go down, Colin Slade go down, and then Aaron Cruden go down. You never know. Like, minutes kind of well invested. You'd rather that than seeing Sexton playing like 80% of the minutes at his age where he doesn't need to be playing that many. I think 50 odds about right. Midfield, you've got two of your key guys essentially in Henshaw and Ringrose. That midfield combo seems to be a really good partnership going forward. And Henshaw was obviously on the Lions tour, as was Aki, who at 12 is there in blue. Henshaw and Ringrose 12, 13 there in green. You got McCloskey, who's had a few minutes there in yellow at 12. And then Ringrose, Carberry and Sexton have had to kind of pop in. But those are just guys when there's been substitutions or towards the end of the game or during yellow cards and things like that. It's kind of nothing that was essentially part of the full-time game plan. But yeah, 13, Ringrose, Henshaw, Hume's there in yellow. Chris Farrell's there in purple. Keith Earls is there in red. And Keith Earls, at least towards the tail end of the season, that does seem to be maybe his new role, is that midfield and potentially outside backs cover. He's another one who people with his age question whether he should still be in the squad, but he's still putting in good shifts. So the fact that he can cover multiple positions is certainly going to do his selection chances no harm going forward. But when you've got Henshaw, Aki, Ringrose, plus the likes of Hume and McCloskey, who are both there in yellow at 12 in 13. I think that depth chart looks healthy. Starting guys, backup guy, and then the kind of third string guys who've had enough game experience that, if called upon, it's not going to be making your debut in a kind of hairy situation. So yeah, I think my my gut feeling about the way Andy Farrell was managing the squad was maybe reading too much social media. I'm not sure. Outside backs, left wing, you got James Lowe, who's played the lion's share of the minutes on that left wing, and then right wing, Earls in green, Conway in blue, Balakoon in yellow, and then Lama in purple. So I like Conway. I kind of wish Conway had more than the time he's got there in blue, but I'm also pleased for Balakoon because he is one of those guys who is still kind of quite raw in terms of his international experience. He has needed that little bit of time. You got Shane Daly there in red as well. So they have tried a few different options. Obviously, you got Stockdale on the left wing as well. His stocks, pun not intended, have kind of fallen a wee bit. And James Lowe, in terms of his international form, seems to have really cracked on. So if he can keep up that left wing spot at the moment is definitely his to lose. But right wing at the moment still kind of seems to be up for grabs. Well, Earls has got the majority. Seemingly his spot as the versatility bench guy is there. So it's between the likes of Conway, Balakoon, maybe Lama to crack on going forward. Fullback though, bloody hell. If Hugo Keenan hadn't have been substituted in that last game against Argentina, he'd have 100% of the minutes. He's played pretty much 80 minutes every single game. And he's been very consistent. Like, talk about making that jersey your own. Now, that's, I suppose, a little bit worrying in terms of nobody else is getting a crack. Like, I know Jordan Lama has played fullback for Ireland before. I've never been 100% certain with him under the high ball, and certainly compared to Keenan. Keenan seems to be the safer pair of hands. But bloody hell, that's the most I've seen from any team, I think, in terms of one player just absolutely hogging the time. So surely he can't do that 2 years in a row. But man, he is he's deceptive, Keenan. He doesn't look like he should be that quick. He doesn't look like he should be that good in the air. But he is. He is. So there you go. So that's the team overall. As I mentioned, like, there's some key guys in terms of like the likes of a James Ryan, who's kind of the captain when Sexton's not around. The locks, Byrne, Henderson as well alongside him. Your props in terms of Porter and Furlong, and then Healy as well. Like, there's a good mix of guys who've got a ton of experience, and some younger guys like Doris, Henshaw and Ringrose are very experienced as well. James Lowe, as I mentioned, Kean, like, these guys have all been kind of dominating. Question mark areas, like, yeah, as I said, who is the reserve tight head that's going to get the crack going forward? Who's going to be the secondary choice fullback if Keenan goes down? Is it Carberry, who was there in blue? Probably not, but you never know. He did a decent job for the very limited time that we saw him. Is it going to be Lama, like I mentioned? Or is someone else going to kind of crack on? Yeah, I'm honestly pretty pleased for Ireland when I see the way Andy Farrell has spread things about. Now, he's been forced to with the Lions Tour, and Sexton rested throughout part of the year, and they played Japan and, was it Canada or the US? US. So that they had a chance to experiment a wee bit, and they seem to have done it pretty well. The starting 15 throughout the year, if you go by the number one guy in each category, has been Healy, Herring, and Furlong. The question mark would be about Herring going forward between those guys, and maybe Healy if Porter steps up to be the starting loose head. Byrne and Ryan are the locks, but remember you got Hendo there as well. Doris, Van der Flair, and Stunder. Obviously, Stunder is gone, so you may be looking at Doris to move to number 8. But yeah, we'll kind of watch that one with interest going forward. Gibson, Parker, Sexton seems pretty much set 19. Henshaw, Ringrose, as I said, pretty much set seemingly. Lowe, Earls, and Keenan. Earls is the one that I think maybe has changed his role over the course of the year, but yeah, we'll kind of have to wait and see. In terms of players used, I think it is at 52. New Zealand was 41 players used throughout the year. Remember, no Lions Tour affecting them. South Africa was 42. England was 55, and then Ireland are at 52 players used. Did I say 55 or 52? 52 players used. So a little bit kind of less than England. Oh, goodness me, 51. My own handwriting is terrible. 51 players used. So the teams who've had the Lions tour to affect them have had to play more players. That's just kind of not rocket science. Interestingly, looking at the starting players and how much of the time did they get, it's about half the time. So 53% of all the minutes played throughout Ireland's year were taken by the guys who started. So all the secondary guys had to divide up less than half the time among them. So about 53%. Now that's more time for the starters than the All Blacks, who had 49%. All Blacks did a ton of rotation, so the starting guys got less of the overall time. England was at 55. South Africa, who like to play their same strongest team, kind of week in, week out, 65%. So kind of in the middle, similar to England, like I mentioned. But yeah, I think that's pretty much gone 20 minutes for Ireland. But as I said, my initial gut feeling going into this one was Andy Farrell keeps playing the old guys. Maybe like Earls, like Omani, even like Healy. There's a bunch of guys who are kind of senior. Sexton, another one. Conor Murray, these guys. And he's not potentially mixing things up enough. But having looked at the numbers, I think he's kind of got the balance fairly well. Could there be improvements? Sure. The results across the season, Six Nations obviously wasn't the best. Mid-year ones, they didn't play a heck of a lot, but they got a couple of games in and won them. End of year, they looked bloody cracking. Smashed my All Blacks. So, yeah, I think seemingly tracking very well with plenty of depth across multiple positions. And some guys who I was a wee bit doubtful of prior to this year, the likes of a Gibson Park, the likes of a James Lowe, seemingly... maybe even Keenan. I don't think he was that good. Have really kind of stepped up quite well. So yeah, forgot to mention Kona at number 8 when I was talking about who's going to replace CJ. I was talking about Doris. Either way, yeah. But you guys let me know your thoughts. And yeah, I guess I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.